One DC project that never made much sense seems like it's not happening anymore. One that did make a lot of sense seems like it kinda still is. And one that no one was quite sure of is apparently very much still being developed. We all learned about this when James Gunn posted about it on Threads this week, and I just want to cover it because I think it's interesting, especially the first part. Also, my cat Mortimer not on my lap, sitting on his rest next to me. He's bummed because he loves watching birds. Nothing makes him more excited than watching a bird, and The Authority, one of the movies we're going to talk about today, would have had a bird person. Now, obviously, Hawkgirl still kind of fills that role in DC now, but there were going to be two, and now it seems like there's only one, so he's a little upset. So, like I said, on Threads, the other day, out of nowhere, someone named I Don't Beat Games, a somewhat large account, 4,000 followers, posted random thought, but I wonder if DC Studios has made any major progress on the Authority film, the picture of the Authority. Someone named Ted Kendrick replied, James Gunn himself was almost certainly the writer-director on the Authority, but he couldn't quite nail the script. He hasn't explicitly admitted he was the creative force behind the film, but when discussing the project, he slipped up once saying, I couldn't, I mean, the writer, and then knowingly laughed it off with the interviewer. Both of these pretty innocuous posts, right? But then James Gunn, one of the most online people in the industry, which can be both good and bad, replied to this thread, and he said, just a normal slip of the tongue. I would have never had time to do this, and although I know this is a popular theory online, I never had an intention of writing or directing The Authority. The script wasn't quite there, but more importantly, it didn't work in terms of the larger DCU, both in terms of the story and practical concerns. Maybe someday, not soon. Now, this gels with pretty much everything we've heard since this was announced, and also just kind of what you'd expect if you know something about this team. And for people who don't know anything about this team, don't know why we're talking about this. When James Gunn started the new DCU, he announced 10 projects in his Gods and Monsters phase. Some of these have already been made. Creature Commandos was the first. Superman, at the time called Superman Legacy. Those are both out. Then on the horizon, we have Lanterns and the Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow movie, now just called Supergirl. So they announced those 4 projects. There were a bunch of other projects, though, that were also announced, some of which we haven't heard much about. Swamp Thing, haven't heard much about that. It seems like the idea was that James Mangold was going to work on it. He was the creative force behind it, and he maybe lost interest or something, and then everything slowed to a halt. It happens. Brave and the Bold, the Batman movie. There's no way that doesn't come out eventually. If I had to guess why that's not a priority right now, because James Gunn's really focused on Superman, and also, more importantly, Warner Brothers is still working on the patents in Batman movies, and I don't think that's going to cross over with these, but I think Warner Brothers maybe wants to take their time, only release one Batman movie at a time, which, sure. Then there was a Waller show. I don't really know what happened with that one. It's possible that maybe some of the elements of the Waller show were folded into the second season of Peacemaker, since that season ends with the creation of Checkmate, or maybe some of them are going to come up in Creature Commandos season 2, since that series did feature Amanda Waller. And I mean, in Peacemaker, Adebayo was Waller's daughter, even though that doesn't come up as much in Peacemaker season 2 as it did in Peacemaker season 1. But like the Waller project seems like that is also on hold. But then there's 3 others. Right, and let's start with Authority. The Authority was a team from a comics company called Wildstorm that was eventually folded into DC Comics. The one you're most likely to know is Midnighter. He has had somewhat of a presence in DC Comics since the merger. Some of the other characters have jumped in and out, but the idea behind the Authority at the time was that in the Wildstorm universe, the superheroes were very integrated with the government. You know, they worked with S.H.I.E.L.D. They kind of had their own evil Nick Fury named Bendix. And like that was how things went until a group of very strong superheroes and wizards and generational beings all got together and decided they needed to be able to do superhero stuff outside of the approval of any one government or the United Nations. So they called themselves the Authority, and they took on that responsibility as a team. Now, something like this has happened many times in comics before. Supreme Power in the Marvel Universe. The idea of the Justice Lords in the DC animated material. Injustice, very famously, also plays with this idea. But the whole superheroes taking superheroing out of the hands of the government into their own hands, like, tale as old as time. I mean, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has done that. Civil War was that. It seems like we're going to do that again, too, with everything Damage Control's been doing in the Marvel Cinematic Universe recently. So the idea of a conflict between the government that manages the superheroes and the superheroes themselves, you know, it leads to this point. And unlike a lot of these other stories, like Injustice, for example, I don't think we're supposed to think the Authority is wrong in doing that. And that's what, at least to me, was so interesting about them. They were a nuanced team. There were some members of the team that were more severe, that you wouldn't want leading it, but Jetty Sparks, who was in charge of the Authority, did seem to have a vision for how this team could exist, and how they could not just become megalomaniacs who take over the planet because they want to. Like, for a while, this team had a purpose, and they did all kinds of zany sci-fi stuff. They had a sentient ship They could fly through the universe using a secret space known as the Bleed. They fought Italians from a different universe. And eventually, Jenny Sparks, the spirit of the 21st century and the head of the team, died because that's what happens at the end of the century, and she was replaced by Jack Hawksmoor, the King of Cities, a man who was able to communicate with and become empowered by cities. It was weird, but fun. And that's the idea with these guys. Very offbeat powers, unusual, but interesting. But eventually, the Jack Hawksmoor team did what a lot of these superhero teams eventually do, which is took over the government and became the government of the world. So not only did they not answer to the politicians when it came to superhero stuff, they just decided they would be better at running the planet. And in this universe, they kind of were, because the people running the planet were so bad at it. Other members of this team, I mentioned Jenny Sparks, Jack Hawksmoor. You had Midnighter, who was kind of like Batman, but with a fight computer in his brain that lets him anticipate any outcome when he walks into a room. You had Apollo, a Superman with the power of the sun. And then Apollo and Midnighter were both gay and in a relationship together, so that was interesting. There was the Doctor, who was sort of like the Sorcerer Supreme of this universe, who also did lots of drugs, and was constantly in communication with all of the other Doctors that had existed throughout history. You had Swift, like I said, just a bird person. And then, finally, you had the Engineer, Angie Spica, who's a scientist who replaced her own blood with nanotechnology, which allows her to become a living machine. She can control machines, she can create whatever machines she wants from her body. And you may recognize the Engineer because she showed up in Superman. She was played by Maria Gabriela de Faria, and she's apparently going to be in the next one of these, Man of Tomorrow. She's one of Lex Luthor's henchmen, which isn't usually how this character works, but otherwise more or less the same. I do think the costume felt like a downgrade because she is supposed to be made of kind of liquid metal, so that she doesn't necessarily look like a machine. She looks like an alien or like an angel or something like that. But like this version of Angie in the DC universe definitely was supposed to be the regular Engineer. She could do all the same things. She could communicate with technology. She could turn her hands into big spinny blades. And most importantly, she could do a handstand backflip thingy that turns her into herself, but facing in the other direction in a shot that was very strange. But, sure, great. So this team is set for a movie. One of the movies alongside Superman, Supergirl, Batman, and Swamp Thing. And then Swamp Thing's sort of an out there pick, but that's a character that matters. That's a character that most DC fans are familiar with, and that is a character who has a run of comics, the Alan Moore Swamp Thing books, that are iconic. So you can see, obviously, that's what they're going to adapt. That's what they want to get at with this character. So it is strange, but not surprising, that the Authority movie does not seem like it's really working. There were rumors at one point that this movie was going to be made by Matthew Vaughn, who I think would be a great fit for it. And it's kind of obvious why this would appeal to James Gunn. Generally, the idea of these characters being the wacky 2000s comic characters, sort of out in their powers, like is strong if in the city. Like that kind of stuff is fun. I think that kind of weird comic book stuff appeals to James Gunn. It's part of what we love about him. And also, this is a team made up of anti-heroes, and James Gunn loves anti-heroes. Guardians of the Galaxy, Suicide Squad, Creature Commandos, that's his thing. This is anti-heroes, but a Justice League. So, I'm not surprised that this was something that was on James Gunn's radar. But when we saw Superman, it did bring up a couple of questions about what the Authority would be. It did make people go, oh, maybe this isn't going to happen the way you kind of expected. Because, first of all, the Engineer in Superman, while technically she has the same power set, does not have the same personality as Angie, and that is what makes that character fun. She is nice, she is bright, she is the friendly member of that team. The same way that Superman is the big blue Boy Scout, I would say Angie is the closest thing the Authority has to a character like that. Now, obviously, she'll still kill and do things that are extreme, but just the vibe of her is pretty specific. And I would not say that's what we got in Superman. So the idea that introducing the Engineer in Superman was so that we could take this character and put her into the Authority movie was a little strange, since she didn't really resemble her comic counterpart. It would be like if you put Groot in a Thor movie before Guardians of the Galaxy came out, but that Groot was a badass with a bunch of guns who kind of just acted like Rocket Raccoon, and it's like, that's not what that character's for. But okay, so there's that. But then on the other side, the thing that I was more confused by, Superman in this movie does not work for the government. Superheroes in the new DCU, some of them work with Argus and work with different government organizations, and they definitely like to be on the same side as America, but the movie itself is about how Lex uses that system against Superman and pushes him away from it, to the point where characters like the Justice Gang, who did not used to intervene in world events because that just was not their place, start doing that at the end of the movie. That's Authority stuff. So if the Justice Gang, including Mr. Terrific and Green Lantern and Hawkgirl, if they're already doing Authority stuff, what makes the Authority special in this universe? Is it just that they kill? Because it seems like Hawkgirl kills. I doubt these guys in those tanks that Green Lantern flipped over all survived. I think that's fine, but again, it would be like if you made Guardians of the Galaxy, but right before that, in that universe, you introduced the Starjammers, and they were also a found family of rogues from space who were pirates and did their own thing. You go, well, I guess we could do Guardians of the Galaxy, but why? What's going to make them different from these guys besides the fact that they have a big lizard guy instead of a big tree? Like, there's not necessarily a place for them. So it is not surprising that we learned from James Gunn that A, he never had any intention of writing or directing the Authority. Sure, I think that's true. I think it makes sense that he would want to produce an Authority thing because he and Peter Safran are the head producers of the new DCU, and like, this is right up his alley. But he says the script wasn't there and it didn't work in terms of the larger DCU, probably for reasons we just explained. So he said maybe someday, but not soon. I think this is the closest we've gotten to an official confirmation that any part of the original plan is done. And we've heard about a lot of projects that are in development that were not in the original plan. Clayface was not in the original plan, even though they've been working on that for a while, since before the announcement took place. The Teen Titans movie that they're apparently writing. All of these projects are actively being developed, and so far the only one that we know is not actively being developed now is the Authority. But there were two shows that people were also curious about. And Average CB Fan asked, in reply to James Gunn's post about the Authority, is Booster Gold still in development? I'm hearing rumors that Booster Gold and Paradise Lost have been canceled. Booster Gold's in a weird spot because Booster Gold at one point had a writing team attached to it. I believe it was the team behind the Righteous Gemstones. However, they have left the project and it's unclear what's going on there. And Paradise Lost was a different story. It seemed like at the time that was their way of doing a Wonder Woman thing without immediately rebooting Wonder Woman, since Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman was one of the more successful parts of the DCEU. So they figured instead of immediately casting a new one, we'll give the character some time, but we'll tell a story about the Amazons on Themyscira, something before Wonder Woman existed. And James Gunn said, Booster Gold is in development, Paradise Lost is in extreme development. I don't know exactly what the difference is. I assume that means Booster Gold is still being worked on, and Paradise Lost is either being worked on more, like it is a higher priority, or they are further along in the process. But according to James Gunn, as we get in one of the replies, someone asked, is there an ultra extreme development project? And he said, yes, the ones that have writers' rooms up. So I guess this does mean Booster Gold is in an early stage. They've made more progress on Paradise Lost, but they don't have a writer's room yet. Now, Booster Gold is also an interesting one because I believe Peter Safran's wife has posted hanging out with Kumail Nanjiani, an actor who a lot of people think would make a great Booster Gold. He made a great Kingo when the Marvel Cinematic Universe wasn't ready for him, but he's already played a kind of dopey celebrity superhero. Why not have him do that again, but for DC, with a character that everybody loves and has known would be great in the movies or television shows forever. And they were barely ever able to do in live action outside of one episode of the Smallville show and the very, very, very end of Legends of Tomorrow. But I believe Peter Safran's wife posted that they were out with Kumail Nanjiani and said hashtag Booster Gold. If it was anybody else, I would say that's speculation, but she probably knows. I'm assuming Peter Safran told her, especially since they hang out with Kumail Nanjiani, so they're probably talking about Booster Gold all the time, if that is something they're working on. So I do think that's where Booster Gold is. They don't have a creative team in charge of it. They haven't nailed down writers, but they have an actor they really like, and James Gunn probably has a lot of ideas for what Booster Gold can be, especially because Booster Gold was part of what it seems like is James Gunn's favorite era of comics, which are like the 80s and 90s when James Gunn was coming up, that Justice League International team. Lee Pace Batman asked James Gunn, nothing certain until the greenlight, but do you and Peter have a good idea as to what the next DCU film on the pipeline is probably going to be? And James Gunn just answered, yes. So that makes sense. Christ GUI96 said, how's script for Mr. Miracle and Creature Commando? And James Gunn replied, good, I watched animatics for both this weekend. Mr. Miracle is another one that we haven't really talked about because that is in development, and it seems like they're really making some progress on it. And season 2 of Creature Commandos we do know is being worked on. We know Captain Atom is going to be in it, and Sidney Chandler is going to be playing Nosferatu, a character that was teased at the end of the last season. So that makes sense. Mr. Miracle's interesting because we know that is being worked on actively. Tom King is working on that. Mitch Gerads, both of the people that worked on the Mr. Miracle comic that people really love from, oh my god, a decade ago? Yeah, about that long. It seemed like we may get some casting information about that one soon. Specifically, Mr. Miracle and Big Barda have to be in there some. And it's animated, so they can do whatever they want. But also, it seems like they want to cast actors who could play the roles in live action if they had to. And I think Mr. Miracle and Big Barda are core Justice League characters in a way that the Creature Commandos aren't. So I would expect to see these actors in live action. I'm only bringing it up because I don't think we know who's going to be playing Mr. Miracle. But this week, Tom King apparently followed Rhea Ripley on Instagram. Rhea Ripley is a professional wrestler who probably anybody who watches WWE is familiar with. And she's one of the actors that people think might make a good Big Barda. Partially because Big Barda is just very large and muscular. Like even more so than Wonder Woman, who is traditionally pretty tall and like big. She's an Amazon, Big Barda's bigger. And she's raised on Apocalypse, one of Darkseid's warriors, but eventually left and became a hero. I don't know if Rhea Ripley is a good actor. I've never seen her act in anything. The hit rate of actors going from professional wrestling to acting recently has been pretty good. Batista, John Cena, and even The Rock are all very competent actors. Cody Rhodes is about to be in the Street Fighter movie, and he'll probably be great, and I'm probably going to love it because I'm loving everything about that movie so far. So if we wanted to cast a wrestler as one of these superheroes, I don't know, seems like something James Gunn would probably be up to, since he brought Batista into Guardians and John Cena into Suicide Squad. And obviously we're showing pictures of her here. Very strong, like very built. Not particularly large, like large for a professional wrestler. That's the thing about a lot of the women in professional wrestling. A lot of them are pretty small, like 5'3", 5'4". Rhea Ripley is 5'8". That's probably like average height for a guy. And like Big Bard is probably supposed to be like 7 feet tall. But I still think if we want an actor who could potentially play Big Barda in real life, like in person, who could embody the physicality of that character, he could do worse than Rhea Ripley probably. Also, Big Barda is not that complicated of a character. Even more so than Wonder Woman, the way Wonder Woman is supposed to be an outsider, supposed to feel alien, her delivery, the way she speaks is supposed to be kind of strange. Big Barda is also that. And she doesn't talk as much. So yeah, I think that is totally plausible. And we did learn that apparently Creature Commandos and Mr. Miracle are both at the animatic stage. That's a good stage. Those seem like they're going to happen. Zurov Lev asked James, how is Man of Tomorrow filming going? And James Gunn said, I'm having a blast. That's great. And the last comment I want to get at, originally I was not sure what the syntax of this was supposed to be, but now I'm reading it as Wonder Woman 2026 saying, why is it taking so long to make all these movies? It's been 3 years. And James Gunn saying, most movies and scripts take at least 3 years to get made. So, this is the kind of thing that I think James Gunn does really well, interfacing with the fans. A lot of the times he'll get fans that are somewhat hostile, because that's how the internet goes. But he does get a lot of people that are just like, how's this filming going? I'm really excited about this thing. And I think that helps him understand what people are looking forward to. Maybe it doesn't make him like greenlight a project, but I'm sure if he hears a lot of chatter about a specific character, that's something he recognizes. So Authority seems to be out. Booster Gold is still in the very early stages. Paradise Lost is further up than that, but it still does not have a writer's room. And we do know that Anna Naguera, who worked on Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, and apparently is working on writing the Teen Titans movie, is also the writer for the Wonder Woman movie. But I would not be surprised if some of the attention that was going towards Paradise Lost and some of that energy is maybe now going to go towards the Wonder Woman movie because that's going to make all the money. Maybe Paradise Lost comes after. Only other piece of weird DC news, at CinemaCon, Michael B. Jordan introduced Adria Arjona as a DC superhero, something that up until this point she has not been. Now he could have been talking about Washington, DC. Maybe she's a superhero there. Or maybe he got confused and thought that Morbius takes place in the DC universe, because that would make about as much sense as anything that happened in Morbius. But what it seems like happened is he knows that Adria Arjona has been cast in some role. I think there's a good chance she is Wonder Woman. Not because I think she's definitely the best person for Wonder Woman, but I do think she is close enough with James Gunn and seems like the right kind of star for something like this. And also, I just think she's very talented. Like, I think she could do it. However, if we had to pick a role for her, it does seem like she's going to be playing Maxima in Man of Tomorrow. But now with this confirmation for Michael B. Jordan, it feels like it's got to be one or the other, right? I mean, I would love her as like a Zatanna personally. I love everybody as a Zatanna, to be fair. I also think she'd be an interesting Catwoman. Now that we pretty much know that Adria Arjona is going to be part of the new DC universe, it's really just a question of which role she wants and which role they want her for. Because I think she could definitely do either. She's not particularly tall and strong like Maxima or Wonder Woman, but also I don't think really anybody is. Except for maybe Karen Gillan, who I think would be a good Maxima. James, if we're still working on it, Maxima, Karen Gillan, red hair, tall, action hero, it's all there. But yeah, I am getting closer to thinking she may be Wonder Woman. I don't necessarily think they're going to put her in Man of Tomorrow, outside of maybe a post-credit scene, but because it's filming now, we'll find out soon. But yeah, That's all the news about the DC universe from the last couple of days. Maybe you want to switch over, look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you want to look at their future, talk about the X-Men, you can check out my video on who should be the first X-Men villain in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I go through all of the characters, and a bunch of the ones that wouldn't, but could still technically do it anyway. I talk about the background of each villain, which ones I think are more likely to show up in the movies soon, and which ones I would like to see more. And that'll be on YouTube eventually, but if you want to watch that video right now, you can check it out on this video sponsor, Nebula. Nebula is, say it with me, a subscription streaming service that I and a bunch of other really cool people helped create. Nebula has evolved so much over the last 7 years. Sure, you can still watch all my videos early and ad-free. You can watch videos by a bunch of other creators you probably already love. But one of the most exciting things about Nebula is our original programming. Tom Scott has a new series called England, where he goes to every English county to find something interesting. Did you check out this first episode where Tom Scott goes to Leicestershire and he visits a bell making factory? You see the entire process, learn how bells are made, and it is not how you would expect, especially since this bell making factory is hundreds of years old and they're still working with some of the same techniques from a century ago. Tom Scott even gets to use a sledgehammer to break one of the bells a little, because shockingly, it's hard to do. It's hard to use a sledgehammer to break an enormous bell. And each episode of England is going to be on Nebula for a week before it goes anywhere else. On top of that, we got a series that I love watching called Abolish Everything, where someone, maybe a comedian, maybe another YouTuber, makes an argument for something that should be abolished. They state their case, they make a very funny PowerPoint, the political establishment gets to weigh in, and then the audience decides what deserves to actually be abolished. This week they did the championship for the second season. They had a ton of really funny people on it. I've never been on that show, maybe sometime in the future. I think I'd be a fun abolitionist. And then later this year, although hopefully not too much later, Nebula's first original dramatic scripted series, Subliminal, comes out with the episode that I wrote, which I cannot wait for you guys to watch. Nebula is the best way to support all of the creators you already love and all the creators you don't know you're going to love, but then you're going to love them when you see them on Nebula. You can also download the videos to your phone, which saves you data when you're not at home. And there are not AI videos on Nebula, so this isn't going to be like YouTube where you go on and you watch a video in a minute or two and you're like, something's off here, and then you realize like, oh, this video is AI. Which happens on YouTube and other platforms way more than I would like to admit. Nebula, we all got real stuff made by real creators, and that's why it's great. And a year of Nebula is already a steal at $60 a year, $5 a month. But if you go to go.nebula.tv/thenandocut, you can get a year of Nebula for just $30. That is $2.50 a month. It is an amazing deal. Again, go to go.nebula.tv/thenandocut to check it out. All right, so thank you for watching this video. Come back to the channel whenever there's DC news. Until then, stay safe. I'll see you around.